Wanting is not always enough, and however much Gorst wanted to, he could not get there. Too many straining bodies in his way. By the time he had hacked the leg from the last of them and flung him aside, the old Northman had already run Jallenhorn right through the guts. Gorst could see the bloody point of the sword under the gilded rim of his rain-dewed breastplate. The general had the oddest expression as his killer struggled to pull the blade out of him, almost a smile. Redeemed. The old Northman twisted around as he heard Gorst's howl, eyes going wide, bringing his shield up. The long steel chopped deep into it, splitting the timbers, wrenching it around on his arm, driving the metal rim into his head and tossing him tumbling sideways. Gorst stepped up to finish the job, but again there was someone in his way. As always. Hardly more than a boy, swinging a hatchet, shouting. The usual stuff, probably. Die, die, blah, blah, blah. Gorst was happy to die, of course, but not for this fool's convenience. He jerked his head sideways, let the hatchet bounce harmlessly from his shoulder plate, spun about, long steel curving after him through the wet air. The boy tried desperately to block it, but the heavy blade snatched the hatchet from his hand and split his face wide open, spraying brains. The point of a sword whispered at him, and Gorst whipped back from the waist, felt the wind of it across his cheek, a niggling discomfort under his eye. A space had opened in the screaming crowd, the battle blooming from a single press to mindless clumps of sodden combat at the very center of the heroes. All concepts of lines, tactics, directions, orders, of sides even, vanished as though they had never been. And good riddance, they only confuse things. For some reason, a half-naked Northman stood facing him with the biggest sword Gorst had ever seen. And I have seen a lot. Absurdly long, as if it had been forged for a giant's use, dull grey metal gleaming with rain, a single letter stamped near the hilt. He looked like some lurid painting by an artist who never saw a battlefield, but silly-looking people can be just as deadly as silly-sounding ones, and Gorst had coughed out all his arrogance in the smoke of Cardotti's House of Leisure. A man must treat every fight as though it is his last. Will this be my last? We can hope. He rocked back, cautious, as the man's elbow twitched up for a sideways blow, shifted his shield to meet it, steel ready to counter. But instead of swinging, the Northman lunged, using the great blade like a spear, the point darting past the edge of Gorst's shield and squealing down his breastplate, sending him stumbling. A feint. The instinct to jump back was powerful, but he forced himself to keep his eyes fixed on the blade, watched its path curve through the rain, an arc of glistening droplets following after. Gorst wrenched himself sideways, and the great sword hissed past, caught the armour on his elbow, and ripped it flapping off. He was already thrusting, but the point of his steel caught only falling water as his half-naked opponent slid away. Gorst switched back for a savage head-height cut, but this man snaked under it, hefted the great sword up with shocking speed as Gorst's steel swept down, blades ringing together with a finger-numbing clang. They broke apart, watchful, the Northman's eyes calmly focused on Gorst in spite of the hammering rain. His weapon might have looked like a prop from a bad comedy, but this man was no jester. The stance, the balance, the angle of the long blade gave him all manner of options both in defence and attack. The technique was hardly what one would find in Rubiari's Forms of Swordsmanship, but then neither was the sword itself. We both are masters, nonetheless. A Union soldier came tottering between them before Gorst could move, bent over around a wound in his stomach, hands full of his own blood. Gorst smashed him impatiently out of the way with his shield, sprang at the half-naked Northman with a thrust and a slash, but he dodged the thrust and parried the cut faster than Gorst would have thought possible with that weight of metal. Gorst feinted right, switched left, swinging low. The Northman was ready, sprang out of the way, Gorst's steel feathering the mud, then hacking a leg out from under a struggling man and bringing him down with a shriek. "Don't stand in the way then, fool." Gorst recovered just in time to see the great sword coming, gasped as he ducked behind his shield. The blade crashed into it, leaving a huge dent in the already battered metal, bending it hard over Gorst's forearm and driving his fist into his mouth. But he kept his feet, drove back, tasting blood, crashed into the Northman's body, shield first, and flung him away, lashed backhand and forehand with his steel high and low. The Northman dodged the high, but the low caught him across the leg with the very point, sent blood flying, and made his knee buckle. "One to me, and now to finish it." Gorst whipped his steel across on the backhand, saw movement at the limit of his vision, changed the angle of his swing, and let it go wide, roaring, opening his shoulder, hit a Carl in the side of the helmet so hard he was ripped off his feet and pitched upside down into a tangle of spears. Gorst snapped back, bringing the steel scything over, but the Northman rolled away as nimbly as a squirrel and came up ready even as Gorst's sword sent up a spray of dirty water beside them. Gorst found he was smiling as they faced each other again, the battle a sodden nightmare around them. "When did I last live like this? Have I ever?" His heart was pumping fire, his skin singing as the rain trickled down it. All the disappointments, the embarrassments, the failures are nothing now. Every detail standing out like a flame in the blackness, every moment lasting an age, every tiniest movement of him or his opponent a story of its own. There is only win or die. The Northman smiled back as Gorst shook the ruined shield from his arm and into the mud and nodded. "And we recognize each other and understand each other and meet as equals, as brothers." There was respect, but there would be no mercy. The slightest hesitation on either side would be an insult to the skill of the other. So Gorst nodded back, but before he was done, he was already springing forward. The Northman caught the sword on his, but Gorst still had his free hand, shrieking as he swung it, gloved fist thudding into bare ribs. The Northman twisted, grunting sideways. Gorst aimed another lashing punch at his face, but he jerked away. The pommel of the great sword shot out of nowhere, and Gorst only just wrenched his chin back far enough, the lump of metal missing his nose by a whisker. He looked up to see the Northman leaping at him, sword raised high and already coming down. Gorst forced his aching legs to spring one more time, notched steel gripped in both hands, and caught the long blade with his own. Metal screeched, that grey edge biting into his Calves-made steel, and, with impossible keenness, peeling a bright shaving from the blade. Gorst was sent sliding back by the force of it, the huge sword held just short of his face, his crossed eyes fixed on the rain-dewed edge. He got purchase as his heels hit a corpse and brought the two of them to a wobbling halt. He tried to kick the Northman's leg away, but he blocked it with his knee, lurching closer, only getting them further tangled. They gasped and spat in each other's faces, locked together, blades scraping and squealing as they shifted their balance one way or another, twisted their grips one way or another, jerked with one muscle or another, both searching desperately for some tiniest advantage, neither one able to find it. The perfect moment. Gorst knew nothing about this man, not even his name. But we are still bound closer than lovers, because we share this one sublime splinter of time, facing each other, and facing death, the ever-present third in our little party, knowing it might all be over in a bloody instant, victory and defeat, glory and oblivion in absolute balance, the perfect moment. And though he strained with every sinew to bring it to an end, Gorst wished it would go on forever. And we will join the stones, two more heroes to add to the circle, frozen in conflict, and the grass will grow up around us, a monument to the glory of war, to the dignity of single combat, an eternal meeting of champions on the noble field of— "Oh!" said the Northman. The pressure released. The blade slid apart. He stumbled back through the rain, blinking at Gorst, and then down, mouth hanging stupidly open. He still held the great sword in one hand, its point dragging through the mud and leaving a watery groove behind. With the other, he reached up and gently touched the spear stuck through his chest, the blood already running down the shaft.
"Wasn't expecting that,"
he said. Then he dropped like a stone. Gorst stood, frowning down. It felt like a while, but probably it was only an instant. No telling from where the spear had come. It is a battle. There is no shortage of them. He heaved out a misty sigh. Ah well, the dance goes on. The old man who had killed Jallenhorm was floundering in the muck just a step and a sword swing away. He took the step, raised his notched steel. Then his head exploded with light.